I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? I recently did some research on my own podcast and just to see, how's it doing? How's it going? What's my listenership like? And I realized that I am a top 10 podcast, a top 10% podcast. That blows my mind. First, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. You're an amazing parent just by showing up and listening to me every week. I really appreciate your support, and I'm just so glad that people have found this to be helpful. And second, it's what I love to do. I love talking into a microphone. I know that sounds funny, but I really do. And I love being able to help people. And I can put these two things together and create something of value. It's a win-win. So thank you for being here from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. It means so much to me that you're listening. So I'm going to dive into today's topic, and that is how to parent a rebellious teenager. So two things that go together like peas and carrots, as Forrest Gump likes to say, are adolescence and rebelliousness, right? You know, that stereotypical idea of a grumpy teenager who's just breaking all the rules, sneaking out at night, and overall just making poor choices, right? Like that's a thing. But it really doesn't have to be. In fact, I really don't like using stereotypes in any fashion, especially if it's negative. So can we just bash that whole idea like, yeah, okay, it happens. But I would venture to say that it's more the exception than the rule. And either way, though, all teens are going to dip into some form of rebellion in some capacity at one time or another. And of course, it takes on a different flavor for each teen. But what is consistent about it is that it's difficult as a parent to navigate these times, especially if your teenager has different priorities or values than you do. So in this episode, I'm going to start by sharing signs of rebellion in teenager. You probably know many of them already. Why teenagers are rebellious. And I'm going to give you 17 tips on how to handle and work with a rebellious teenager in your life. So buckle up. Let's dive in. Here are 5 signs of rebellion in teenagers, right? It's kind of the usual ones you've heard of. Self-defeating and self-destructive behaviors, so doing things without thinking about the consequences or implications. Another one, number 2, neglecting the responsibilities like schoolwork over a long period of time. So this is more than just, I don't like that class or I'm focusing on my love life more than my studies right now. It's like a longer period of time frame, and it's having an impact on their grades and on their life. Number 3 is drinking alcohol and experimenting with drugs. Pretty self-explanatory. Number 4 is breaking the rules and even laws. So this can go from coming home after curfew or lying about where they're going, all the way to stealing and vandalism. And number 5 is engaging in physical risk-taking, like extreme sports or other dangerous, risky activities. So let's talk about, why are teenagers rebellious? Why? There have been lots of studies done, and many of them just show that it can have a combination of genetic and environmental factors. So it's a little bit of both. And just by understanding it, it can be a little bit easier to address this challenge. So number 1 is it can just be a form of seeking attention. It's an attention-seeking behavior. So maybe they're jealous of parental focus on another sibling. So this attention that you're giving them for their rebellious behavior, it may be negative, but that doesn't matter. Attention is attention. So it's attention seeking. Number 2 is, we've talked about this before, the lack of the frontal lobe development in their brain. It can really impact their ability to make wise decisions. They make immature judgment choices, and they're more impulsive. Number 3 is social anxiety. So this can actually cause teenage rebellion, especially if your teenager is worried about missing out or FOMO. So I'm afraid that I'll be left out and I won't belong or I don't belong. So I'm going to do this so that I don't feel anxious around these people, which is also peer pressure, kind of ties in with that. Doing what the group does just because I don't want to be left out or I don't want to be seen as a square. That's how the kids speak these days, right? I don't want to be seen as a square, man. And another reason is teens just go through a lot of changes. There's a lot of mood swings, ups and downs, and that can really lead to rebellion. So let me dive in now to the 17 tips on how to deal with a rebellious teenager. Number 1 is to just decide for yourself what behaviors are unacceptable for you. So there's going to be a lot of things your teenager is going to do that's going to annoy you. And you might not like the things that they wear. You may not like what they're doing with their time. You may not like their messy bedroom. But if you react to every one of these behaviors, your relationship with your teenager will just become one big argument. And over time, your teenager is going to see you as a parent who can just never be pleased. And not only that, if you're constantly just criticizing them, they're soon just going to block you out. They're just going to stop listening. And that's really going to turn into a problem, especially when you really need to share disapproval of something that's really important. So it's really important for you to be clear about the difference between these behaviors that are just annoying and the ones that are unacceptable. And then you can pick your battles. So this can vary from parent to parent. What's annoying for one parent may be a deal breaker for someone else. So just ask yourself, is this something that's just annoying me or is it really unacceptable? And a really great way to know the difference is, are my values being challenged in this situation? If the answer is no, then it's probably not a top priority. But if the answer is yes, the next step would be to rate on how challenging it is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. Anything above a 6 would be considered worthy of a discussion. Screaming at you while you're trying to explain something or calling you a dumbass to your face, that would be examples of unacceptable behaviors. Whereas what time they take a shower or leaving an empty cereal box in the pantry may be a little less important. Number 2 is to just accept the fact that your teenager isn't perfect. Of course, nobody's perfect. We know that. But the idea of overparenting, one of the forms of overparenting can be just expecting too much of your teenager. This happens all of the time. The teens I talk to, they feel like their parents are expecting from them something that they themselves didn't achieve until they were in their 30s or 40s. And they're thinking, they're expecting me to have this lifestyle or have all of my stuff together when I know, and they've told me themselves, they didn't even have that themselves until they were middle-aged. Of course, it's only best, you want what's best for them. Of course you do. We're all wanting to protect and care for our kids. But wanting what's best for your teenager can really easily turn into something negative, like a little too much. And that's what happens. I know I've talked about this on the podcast when parents turn their teens into a status symbol or a project that needs fixing. So for these parents, it's like their teenager is never quite good enough. This bar is being raised over and over, leaving the teen feeling unworthy and just really lacking confidence. So as a parent, it's really critical to remember that these teenage years are about you letting go. Your teenager is learning to separate themselves from you. They're in this process of launching out into the world. So they really want independence. They want autonomy. And that can be hard because you're really concerned about their future. But it's just really important to balance that concern with your teenager's need to become their own person. On to number 3, and that is to focus on just one issue at a time. So you may be seeing a lot of problematic or risky behaviors, but if you try to deal with them all at once, it's going to be really hard to really address any one specific behavior effectively. It's so much better to just choose one and focus on one thing at a time. That way, the focus will be clear and you're going to avoid overwhelming your teenager. So, what can be helpful is for you to create a hierarchy of behaviors that you're concerned about and just choose a place to start and pick something that could impact the other areas as well. That's a great strategy. Then have a conversation about it. When you're having this conversation with your teen, my recommendation is to have it outside of the home. And it can be helpful because your teen probably thinks of your home as a place where you have all of the power. So it's better to have this conversation on a neutral ground, like in a coffee shop or out on a walk or even in a car. I mean, that can be tricky because they might see that as where you have all the power as well, but you can discern for yourself. But somewhere that's outside of the home. And bonus points if you have the conversation at a place where your teen actually wants to be. So they're happy to be there and they're probably in a pretty good or at least a neutral mood. And this will really improve the chances of them being more open to having a discussion and being calm in the process. And just make sure that conversation is focused on problem solving and make sure that your teen is part of the process of finding a solution. And what this is going to do, it's going to create this atmosphere where both of you are able to suggest possible solutions to the problem. Because what you don't want to do is avoid turning this into a one-sided conversation where you set the rules and your teen has to just accept what you're saying. Because these one-sided conversations, they're just going to lead to confrontation, which isn't going to help any situation. So just make sure the discussion that you're having with them is a win-win, or at least no one is losing here for both of you. And make sure that your teen doesn't leave the meeting or discussion feeling like they've lost and that you've won. And a way to do this is to just make sure that your teenager feels heard. Just allow them to play an active role in reaching the outcomes that you both can agree upon. Number 4 is to put off the conversation if you or your teen starts to become angry. And remember, the purpose of having this discussion isn't to just vent frustrations. And when there's anger involved and when people are getting frustrated, it can be really hard to find a solution that both of you are going to be agreeable to. So if either of you starts to get angry, it's best to agree, hey, let's continue this conversation at another time. Number 5 is to avoid casting judgment onto your teen. So avoid statements that begin with things like you always or you never. These kinds of statements, they're just really general and they're going to put your teenager on the defensive. And if your teenager feels like you regard them as the problem teen or the problem person, there's this problematic behavior is just going to continue. It's because teens tend to behave in a way that's consistent with how their parents view them. So if they perceive that you're seeing them as just a mess up or somebody who makes mistakes and rebels all of the time, they're going to be like, well, I guess that's who I am. And they're going to be more likely to continue with that behavior. Number 6 is to understand how your teen feels instead of just coming up with solutions. Of course, it's natural to point out solutions to their problems. You want to do that. But instead of doing that and pointing out what they're doing wrong, start by building this better relationship with your teen by listening, actively listening to what they're saying. Maintaining eye contact, nodding your head, using phrases like, tell me more, I want to understand. Encourage them to keep talking. Summarize what you're hearing. Number 7 is to share your feelings about how their behavior is affecting you. One of the reasons your teenager is being rebellious is they feel this lack of power. And you can bring these things back into balance in your relationship by allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So instead of just telling your teenager that their behavior is just not acceptable, tell them how you feel about the behavior, not how the behavior makes you feel. Nobody can make you feel anything, but be how you feel when you're experiencing this behavior, when this is happening. So for example, you could say, I feel worried when I see you staying up late on a school night. I worry that it's going to be hard for you to get through school the next day. Just by sharing your feelings instead of nagging and criticizing, you're going to make yourself a little more vulnerable. And dealing with this teenage attitude in this way, your teen's going to be more understanding of what your perspective is and potentially less rebellious. And number 8 is to point out the good behaviors too. I know it can be so hard to become focused on the things that bother you or worry you. And I know I've said this before, but it's so important to point out the good you're seeing as well. Like I said before, your teenager is going to see themselves the way you see them. And if you are willing to share with them the good things you're seeing, then they'll realize, oh, it's not just the bad, it's the good things too. They are noticing. So make sure you're doing that as well. Number 9 is to not use sarcasm when you're talking with them. I know it can be funny to be sarcastic. It can be, but it is also a form of aggression. So think about it. It's like passive aggressive behavior. Using sarcasm, it's going to damage the relationship between you and your teen. That's because your teenager is going to feel belittled in that conversation. So if you're in the habit of using sarcasm, make a conscious effort to eliminate that habit altogether when it comes to talking about these behaviors, especially in serious conversations with your teen. Because using sarcasm will often result in this toxic home environment, and it can lead to your teenager becoming even more rebellious. Number 10 is to set an example for your teen. It's really not reasonable to expect your teen to behave a specific way if you don't model that behavior yourself. So model respect by giving respect. So for example, you might be feeling like saying, it's already 10 o'clock and you've been on your phone all night. You haven't even started your homework. You're wasting so much time. But speaking this rudely this way, this judgmental tone, it sends this indirect message to your teen that it's okay to talk like that to someone. Instead, talk with them like in a calm manner. It's 10 o'clock. What's your homework plan? Along the same lines of talking with them, number 11 is don't lecture your teen. Just don't. Lectures are not going to work. Your teenager's just going to tune you out. And another problem with lectures is that they're focused on the past. It's basically you telling them a long list of these past incidents and mistakes. And what can be so much more productive is to focus on the future and ask your teen questions and invite them to be part of the solution. So let's say, for example, your teenager breaks the curfew. Instead of lecturing them about the importance of staying with the curfew and following the rules, try to understand why'd they come home late. Because when you understand the situation, you're better able to shift this conversation towards solutions. And they're going to be more open to talking about it as well. Number 12 is to try to uncover if there's something else going on with your teen. Because when you're having problems with teen rebellion, it's just so natural to focus on the behavior itself. But first, you want to try to get to the root of the issue. What else is going on here? And take time to listen to your teen. I probably said that 5 to 6 times already. Listen to your teen. Build a relationship so that they're going to be more willing to share these problems with you. Because your teen's behavior will improve when you do address that underlying issue. Number 13, to have fun with your teen. Do something fun with them. So much of life is just taken up by these routine activities, routine schedules, and it doesn't even occur to some parents to do something fun with their teen. So like once a month, go somewhere with your teen. Do something that you both like doing. Maybe going to the movies or taking a hike or go do trapeze. I did that with my teenager once. Woo, that was fun. And I was sore for days. Side note, after we did the trapeze, I'm like one of those people that likes doing stuff like that. The person who was running the trapeze program was like, hey, when you get home, I know you're like in shape and stuff, but when you get home, take some ibuprofen. You'll thank me tomorrow. I did. I took the ibuprofen and I did thank him, but I had no idea it was going to be that sore. Do you have to do trapeze? No. But do something fun. It gets you out of the house. It gets you focused on something else and something positive. And say along those same lines, do something nice for your teen. A gesture, a little thing, a little acknowledgement, it can go a long way. So if you're going through a rough patch, you may not feel like doing this, but remember that love is intentional. You don't have to feel like showing love in order to act in a loving way. So some examples might be to write them a note, wish them a good luck on a test, give them a Starbucks gift card or a gift card to their favorite place to eat, offer to make them a snack or their favorite dinner. Just do something kind. And it's not particularly powerful when it's a reward for good behavior, quote unquote. It's because your teen's going to realize you did it just because you love them. It's not a reward. It's done out of love. I see you and I love you. Number 14, don't set rules without explaining the reason behind them. So when you come up with rules as a family, talk about the reasons why, and especially when you have teenagers. Your teen is going to be more likely to accept the rules if they understand the reasons behind them. And if they ask about the reason behind one of your rules, don't say, because I said so, or my house, my rules, right? That's just going to leave your teen feeling frustrated and powerless and potentially more rebellious. So when you create rules, do your best to just include your teen in making these rules. So for example, I think we need to talk about how late you can stay out at parties. What sounds like a reasonable time to you? And having discussions like this, it's a really great way to build your relationship with your teen. And it will make your teenager feel like what they think and what they feel is being heard. Number 15 is to realize that your teenager is rebelling because he or she feels powerless. As a parent, it's so hard to remember what it was like to be a teen, but in your teenager's eyes, you have all the power and they don't have any. It's something I hear from my clients over and over again. They just feel powerless and out of control in their life because in every aspect of their life, they feel like someone else has the power. So there's people forcing them to go to school, even if they don't want to go, and do their homework. There's boundaries related to when they can use their phone, how much computer time they can have, data they can have. There's rules about how much TV they can watch, how much time they need to be at home, what time they need to be home, when they can shower, when they can eat, what they can eat. Yes, boundaries are necessary, but it's also really important to give your teenager a sense of control and autonomy in their life. And the truth is, you're not going to be able to control every choice your teenager makes. Neither of you can control every aspect of their behavior. So if you empower them to make these decisions for themselves, you're going to motivate them to try harder. Number 16 is to be patient. Don't expect sudden improvement in your teen's behavior. Even if you take all of these tips and you apply them and you follow them to the letter, it's still going to take some time to see results. Your teenager didn't become rebellious overnight or choose to have rebellious behaviors overnight. It's something that took time, months, even years. And the same time, helping them become less rebellious is also a process, and that's going to take time too. And number 17, get professional help. If this situation isn't improving, look for help. If your teenager is open to counseling, absolutely. Maybe they don't want to share what's really going on with you, but they may open up to someone else. So it could be help for your teen. It's also really nice to just get an outsider's perspective and expert guidance from someone else. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. And trying to do so, it can really put a strain on your relationship with your teenager. And this is something I help parents with in my private coaching practice. For more information and to apply to work with me, click the link in the show notes. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.